Welcome to the Acting Notes podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things acting, from tips and tricks to business information. I'm your host, Justin Powell, and today I'm going to be talking with Michael Roud of Michael Roud Photography in Los Angeles, California. Michael is a headshot photographer in Los Angeles with over 15 years of experience. And I actually met Michael 2.5 years ago when I shot with him, when he did my headshots. And they were the best headshots I had ever gotten. And very soon after, I saw he was looking for an assistant and someone to come in and take over as a secondary photographer down the line. And so I applied as quickly as I could, and I've been working with him ever since. One thing I love about this studio and its philosophy, I'm in Michael Roud's studio right now. One thing I love about it is Michael's passion for actors and actresses. When I shot with Michael, and what I've seen from working with him for 2 years now and seeing how he interacts with clients, is he cares so much about the people who come through these doors. He wants to understand who they are as people and as artists so that he can better capture them. You know, the goal of Michael is to meet actors and actresses where they're at, to help them find what makes their heart sing in the art and to capture that so that they can go out and get the best roles that they possibly can. He's a workhorse. He has so much insight to share on headshots, and I'm very excited to have him on. So let's stop dilly-dallying and let's get to the podcast. And I'm here with the photographer and my boss, Michael Roud. Mike, thanks for joining me.
Justin, thank you so much for having me. It's nice to be here.
Oh, I'm glad to have you here. Headshots are such an important thing for actors, right? It's like their calling card. Mm-hmm. And you deal with so many actors every week trying to get headshots from you. I'm wondering if you can describe what makes a headshot different from a portrait or a personal photo, because a lot of times actors starting out just have a friend take a photo for them. So why do they need a headshot instead?
So headshots are very specific, and they're very specific in the sense that they sell actors for what they would be good at in terms of roles, and also in their essence about what makes them marketable. So they're very specific tools that help casting directors, agents, managers understand what an actor brings to the table.
Yeah. Okay, I love that. Now, when actors come in to get their headshots, I feel like there's a lot of common mistakes that you see, and you can see them even in the finished product. When I have actors submit for projects that I'm casting and things like that, you can see headshots that stand out versus those that don't.
Right.
What do you think are common mistakes that actors make when it comes to headshots, and how can they avoid those?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think the most common mistake that people do, whether it's professional headshots or on their own, is that they design it so that they look pretty and as good as they can, but it often doesn't look like the actor, or it doesn't sell what makes the actor interesting. So when there's an overemphasis on that, although it looks like a good shot and people are excited to show their friends or people, loved ones, about how good they look, it's not useful at all and actually detrimental.
So you think that a lot of times actors come in just trying to look good, and those are the choices they make, but those don't actually market them at what they can do best?
I think that that's exactly right. I think we all want to look good. Who doesn't want to look sexy and at their best? And I think that that's something that you can look good in your headshots, but that's not the most important thing. And I think that often we're not very good judges of how we look, because what I've noticed through shooting, honestly, tens of thousands of people, is that we're drawn to pictures that don't look like ourselves. And that sounds weird. Why would we be drawn to a picture that doesn't look like ourselves? Well, we're drawn to pictures that don't look like ourselves because we're tired of looking at ourselves. As much as we might love ourselves, as many actors love themselves, as much as I love myself, for example, we get tired of seeing the same old thing. So when we see something different, or we notice something different about ourselves in a picture that we like, that's going to be what draws us to the picture, and we get very excited about that because maybe we look different than we believe, and that's not the purpose of a headshot, and it's a really important pitfall to avoid.
Gotcha. I feel like something that I've seen too, because I also shoot with Mike. For MRP Plus, I'm a photographer here as well.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate your work here.
Yeah, and Mike, of course, trained me so much. But something I see sometimes with actors is they can come in and there's so much pressure around a headshot session because it feels like something we don't do that often. And when we do it, we want to make sure that it's the best because we know we're investing a lot of money into it. And it's, ideally the only headshot session we'll need for a couple of years. So what are some techniques that you recommend for easing some of that pressure so that we can actually bring our full selves to the shoot?
That's a really good question, Justin. So some of the things to ease the pressure, the first is to know that at least when you come into our studio, like we're here as a vessel of support to get you the roles you want. So I think switching the paradigm about, I have to get the best headshots ever. I don't want to disappoint the photographer. Am I doing this okay? Well, no, we're here to support you to get the best thing that we can get to make you visually marketable and to make you marketable for agents, casting directors, and whatnot. So there shouldn't be pressure to impress the photographer, which is really important. So know that we're visual experts here to support you and get you what you need. But that should take off some of the pressure. With respect to like spending a lot of money, for example, or some of the other things, maybe can you clarify your question?
Yeah, I think that when we come into headshots, so this is my experience, friends who I've worked with, there's just a lot of pressure to make sure that you picked out the right clothes,
sure,
you have the right characters in mind.
Right.
Maybe, some people subscribe to don't think of any characters, just be yourself, right? In the shot. That you don't look dead. All of these pressures that are on the actor.
Right.
What are some ways that they can either maybe prepare beforehand,
sure,
or just ease themselves during the shoot?
Oh man, so there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, fix acting.
Yeah. No, so there's a lot to unpack there because first we're talking about the preparatory phase, then we're talking about a phase when you come into the shoot and how you perform during the shoot. And those are very different things. So what I'd like to do is maybe break that down.
Okay.
So let's talk about the preparatory phase, like preparing yourself for the headshot shoot. Well, I think it's really important that you think about the roles that you want to be marketed as and know that, and also buy clothes that represent those roles by looking at, and like, for example, looking at the roles on TV of that you think you would be good at and understanding what they wear and then bringing something similar into the shoot is really important. So you have to do research. People think they can just come in, put a bunch of clothes in a plastic bag and it's going to be successful. I mean, that's not setting up a shoot for success. You have to put in the work about understanding the characters you want to go for, having some sort of idea of what that marketability is. And of course, I can tell how someone is marketable when they bring in a bunch of clothes and they don't know. Yes, but it's a lot more effective when you have an idea as an actor of how you're marketable, have done your research on the clothes, know what looks good, have an idea, and then I might change that idea or give you some other ideas based on that or other clothing that you've brought in. But it's really good to have some sort of notion of how you're marketable. That's a preparation phase. Is similar to a test. If you don't study for a test, you're not going to do well. You don't go to the class, and you take your final exam, you're not going to do well. In a headshot session, you have to do some work beforehand to, get the right clothes, the right colors. You don't want to buy cheap shirts, for example. They look cheap on camera. Mm-hmm. Primary colors, although they were popular a few years ago, are not popular anymore. They're too bold. They take away from the picture. I know people sort of emphasize, well, I want a bright color for a commercial shot, for example. Well, sort of, yes, you do, but you don't want a color that's so strong, such a bright color, but it's also stark in a funny way that it is taking away from your face. It's taking all the attention of the photo. So there's these things that you need to understand. Cheap clothes look cheap. You want to get, more expensive clothes or interesting textures. You want a layer tends to look good. Understanding how color combinations work. You want to know how your season, are you a fall, winter, spring person? If you don't know that, you might want to do some research online or get a consultation with us to know your colors. These are all important things to prepare for the headshot session.
Mm-hmm. I think, much like, especially with acting, right? If you go on stage and you barely looked at your lines, you didn't work on the character at all, your performance is going to be shaky because you're not confident. I think even just doing all of that preparatory work through the headshot session, you'll feel a sense of relief because I have a game plan, I'm confident, and that makes it easier to be shot.
So you're exactly right, Justin. There is a sense of doing the work so that you feel confident. And then the amazing thing is it's very similar to acting also in the session and the process, because once you come in and you've done that work and you express it to us, it's time to let go. Because you're in good hands, and our job is to understand what you think, how you think you're marketable. What you've brought is your tools for that marketability, and then let us put that together for you. So that's also important, like similar to acting. You do all this work and how you want to do a scene and how you want your emotions to play in certain areas and sort of where your character is coming from. But ultimately, when you're in that scene, you can't be just hitting marks about emotional resonance in certain areas. You need to be listening to the actor and being in the moment, right?
Totally.
Headshots are the exact same thing. So the important process is setting yourself up for success with preparation and then letting go during the session, which is exactly the same as what good acting is.
Nice. Well, let me ask you a little bit about that too, in the session, because I think a fear a lot of actors have. In fact, there was a podcast about this topic called Dead Eyes, and it was an actor who nearly got cast in Saving Private Ryan, lost the part, and he found out through the grapevine that it was because Tom Hanks told the producers he has dead eyes. He wanted this whole mission to figure out what exactly that means. But I think a lot of actors, we can feel this when we get our shots taken, and then when we get them back, we think, my eyes aren't alive.
That's hard, yeah.
So how do actors better bring life to the eyes during their shoot or to their characters?
So there's a couple different ways to accomplish that, and everyone's different. Similar to acting and what people rely on for their motivation or what makes them a good actor. There's substitution, there's all these techniques, right? So one specific technique I like to do is I have people run lines. Okay. So we'll create scenarios and have them run lines. And right after they finish the line, I'll take a shot. And they need to hold the feeling of that line right after they run it. That's a good way for trained actors to liven up their eyes, okay? But that's just one of many methods. Another can be we talk them through scenarios, which you do so wonderfully at MRP Plus. So Justin is a great director and super, super talented at talking people through scenarios.
See, Mom.
See. No, so something that you're really quite brilliant at is talking people through scenarios so that they're interesting and they can follow with their eyes. And it's something that actors tend to relate to, right? And so that's another way of doing it, where actors sort of relate with the scenarios that you're bringing and really feeling them. Another technique is substitution, like directly. So thinking about something in your life that might feel hard or something that excites you so that we get a spark in the eyes. So that's what you're paying a photographer to do, is just sort of bring that out of you. However, there is some work on your part in ownership that you have to be willing to go for it and not hold yourself back.
Yeah.
And then lastly, something I'd like to say about this, and of course I can go on and on and on because I have so much to say about every topic with headshots, but I would say about 25% of the population just has eyes that seem disinterested. And maybe that's what Tom Hanks was pointing out with dead eyes. So this is different than if you think that you're not giving a good expression in a shot. It's when you are taking shots in general, your eyes just don't seem very expressive. And that is, I was saying, about 25% of the population that happens to. And it tends to be people who are more thoughtful and introverted, and their eyes will seem like they're not interested for some reason. So there's certain techniques, if you're one of those people, to work on, to use to get your eyes to be activated right now. And if that's something you guys are interested in knowing about, well, and that's a problem, you got to hit us up and know the secrets. But glad to talk more about that.
Excellent. Let me look on my questions here. How often do you recommend actors update their headshots? When is the time to do that?
Oh, that's such a good, you have good questions, probably because I wrote them. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't. Justin, how often do you think people need to get headshots?
Oh, you're not supposed to do this.
Oh, am I not?
I always view it as, when your look drastically changes, as your career is growing, I kind of view it as like every 2 to 3 years. That's at least how I've approached it, because I tend to look pretty different after 2 to 3 years. Or if you just get, if I were to shave my head tomorrow, I decide I'm going crew cut for a while, then I can get headshots to my shit.
So that sounds about right to me. I think that there's this notion, since actors are feeling like they're not getting traction, that they get headshots every 6 months or all the time, which is fine. I think that a lot of times they're wasting their money because they're getting not as good headshots. They're not spending as much money, so the shots are not as good. And they think because they're changing their role, maybe something will hit. Instead of recognizing, hey, it's a slow time right now. Maybe I should switch up one of the past shots I have, and maybe there's other things I can be doing to be more effective. So I think that people tend to look at headshots as the main reason why they're not working at a given instant, and sometimes it's not as effective as they think to get new headshots as often as every 6 months, because I don't think you need to, unless you're going out like gangbusters, which just isn't the case right now for most actors. So I think that if we've done a good job in our studio and we've gotten you successful headshots, that I think about every 2 to 3 years can work. It depends though. If you're a teenager, that's not going to be the case. If you're a person who's changing their hair, like you're saying, that's not the, then you need to get it once you've changed your hair or style. But I think 2 to 3 years is probably a good range.
So, just have a question I completely forgot. Well, here's a question, because, obviously a lot of my audience, some people are based in LA, but there's also people all over the world.
Right.
And we do have people that fly in to kind of shoot with us.
Right.
It's really exciting.
Yep.
But for people who maybe can't fly in,
right,
or just looking for a good photographer,
sure,
what are some things that they should look for in a photographer for their headshots?
So I love that question, and it has been really exciting actually. That it has been slow in the industry. We all identify that. So now about 30 to 40% of our shoots are people flying in, which has really been wonderful, and makes us feel good and really cool. So if you're able to fly in, we'd love to work with you. But looking for headshots in your area. So there's a couple important things to realize. If you're in a small town, not a major city, it's really hard to get good headshots that are going to be effective. So it is worth trying to go to a major hub. New York, LA, Chicago, Atlanta, although New York and LA are the main centers. In LA, although I'm biased, is definitely the best place for headshots. LA headshots will work everywhere. That being said, what you should look for in headshots in your region, or if you're just going to go with someone, is one, do the people look comfortable in front of the camera? Are they evoking roles that you can imagine on TV? Does the lighting feel professional? How's their reputation, and how do other people feel like they've done with that person? Those are things. So you have to feel like if that person's going to jive with you, like stylistically, their professionalism in terms of just their shots in general. And then, price point is something to think about. You don't want to overpay for something that you feel like is not as high quality. And that's what you're likely to do in other markets. So for example, in New York, you're very likely to overpay. They're extremely headshots are very expensive in New York and not as high quality as at least I believe is LA. There's so many headshot photographers here that drives down prices. So you're much more likely to get very high quality shots at lower prices just because the competition's so fierce.
Gotcha. I wonder if we could maybe touch on, and we already talked about preparation a little bit.
Sure.
I wonder if we could talk about, how many good headshots do you need in a portfolio?
Okay. So there's two things that depends on. One, if you have an agent or manager that's really pushing you, then they're going to have a different thought than what I'm saying right now. They're going to tend to say 3 shots. 3 to 4 shots maybe, because they're pushing you. That is very rare that happens, that the manager's actually pushing you and when they say they're pushing you. It's just because they're so busy, right? So you don't need as many shots when your agent and manager is pushing you, because they want their words to fill in the blanks for casting. They want to have that power, and also there can be some allure to it. So there is not, you don't need as many shots, right? If you have a very active agent and manager. For the other 99% of people, the minimum, I believe, is 6. 6 fills up your portfolio and Actors Access and the other sites. It's a decent number where you can show range. Usually you can have a commercial shot or 2 within that. And it allows you to show your variety, your different looks that you're capable of, which is really important because people want to know that you're going to be able to transform into the role. And it's very hard to see that or to know that when you don't see a shot that looks like the role you're looking for.
Yeah, I think we could talk about that too, because there's always this debate in the online, acting sphere about should you be going specifically for roles in your headshots, or should you just kind of show up and just be yourself the entire time? I've always fallen on, I think it's a good idea to have clothes, to have character and expression that can lend towards roles. But what do you fall on that?
Okay, so there's a couple different factors that actors need to consider. Sometimes agents and managers really want various roles. And they're like, I need you in a lab coat with a stethoscope and holding a scalpel. Joking about the knife part, but they want very specific, and that's what they feel like they need. And I think you got to honor what your agent is saying, because you want them to push you and you want them to feel respected, and they will if you honor what they say. Do I think you need that so specifically in terms of shot? No, I think that if you tended to have something though that did have scrubs on, it might look more like a doctor and be effective, but it could be a nurse, it could be a lot of other things, right? So I think that you can kind of imply a lot with a little bit. So for example, a detective, I don't think you necessarily need the badge, right? And a gun and all these things, but a suit that could look like a detective would wear with a loosened tie would indicate that you could be a detective, as long as I'm doing my role in the lighting, making it edgy and working for that, working for that role. So there's a lot of factors that play into that. So you asked something that I think is really good though, and specifically it was about, do people need shots that just are them, right? Something like, do you just need a shot that's your essence?
Yeah.
Like essence shots, essentially. So it's sort of like what famous people have, right? Like Kate Winslet on the cover of Variety, it's an essence shot in a certain sense. The problem with that is, although I love shooting essence shots, is you need to have a very interesting look to make an essence shot really work. So first of all, your essence and what you're able to bring to the camera in front of the camera has to be very interesting and good, and you have to know what you're doing. Secondly, your look has to be interesting enough that it can captivate someone without pushing them towards a role, and people can put that role onto that shot, or else it's just going to feel like a really boring photo. There are very few people who are able to do that. I would say probably 5% of the population or less is able to have a really successful essence shot that is captivating. And it's not that you're not good looking, or it's none of that. It's just that there's so many things required for an essence shot to work effectively that most people aren't able to pull it off.
Interesting. But what about in terms of just like a general theatrical?
Right.
So I think that's maybe the closest that the other 95%, myself included, can get to. So what do you recommend for, that moment when you're doing your general theatrical, the one that can hopefully fill a lot of Wall Street?
So are you asking me can you clarify your question? Are you asking me whether I think that that's effective and they should just have a general theatrical?
Yeah, I guess maybe what I'm leaning towards to asking, for people who are just starting out,
sure,
thinking of booking their first shot session ever, what kind of shots should they really be focused on getting? Is the general worth it, or are there other areas they should put their attention to?
Okay. I think in general, if someone's starting out, the main shots they should have is, one, a commercial shot that can be general, that has a bright light feel that will allow someone to get in the room and will allow them to get a rep, because getting a commercial rep is much easier. I think that someone tends to need a look that's a little more upscale. This is like boiling it down to its most basic part.
Of course, yeah.
And it depends how old you are, right? If you're 18, upscale is not necessary. It's not useful. There's no roles where you're going to be upscale. But in generality, an upscale look and something that is more everyday would be the three that is like a must. But I also think a business look often for people is super important. It can be high-end business, it can be low-end business, it could be both. It depends on the person. But some sort of business professional look is really important for all the different shows out there, procedurals, detective, you name it. That's a good look. A darker look is very important. It's a darker, maybe you can go a little more general with that, but that's really important. And an additional look. Darker can be edgy in terms of edgy clothing and leather jacket, but it doesn't have to be. Those are some additional looks that I think are really important.
Awesome. I guess I don't really have any more questions other than, what's just one bit of advice you wish you could give to all the actors in the world, something that can help them with their headshots or just with their art as well, because you yourself are a writer and director as well. You're very versed in just the life of being an artist.
Right.
So what's some advice you just wish you could give to everyone?
Some advice. Well, I think in order to do your art well, you need to be able to have time to do your art. So I always recommend that people find a career or something else that's able to provide a high level of income with the least amount of time, so that you're able to focus on your art and train. I think it's really important that actors are constantly training. It keeps you excited, it keeps you open, keeps your instrument tuned. So I think having a way to sustain yourself outside of the industry as well is really important, where you don't have to spend all your time doing it. I think in terms of headshots, what do I wish people knew is that they need to take care of themselves before the session and the week prior, and so often month prior, to eat right, take it seriously in terms of exercising, not eating really salty foods, because that will tend to not make your features not look as good. So especially during the week prior